Welcome to the fifth film in our Pitched Roof series, in which we look at the various layers that typically make up a pitched roof. Roofs are required to fulfill a number of different functions both inside and out. Externally, they must provide sound insulation against exterior noise, thermal insulation against cold exterior air, and protection against wind and sunlight, as well as diverting water. Internally, they need to absorb or reflect room noise, act as a barrier to water vapor, store condensate, adjust to changes in air pressure, and retain warmth inside. Not to mention aesthetic considerations. The various layers that go to make up a pitched roof depend on a set of specific conditions. To establish these conditions, it is first necessary to understand what the space will be used for. If a roof space is to be used as living space, the roof structure must include thermal insulation, and the order of the various layers is determined largely by the position of the insulating material. As wood is a passable heat insulator, the insulation in a timber-framed roof can be laid between the rafters. Laying the insulating layer alongside the structural layer results in a lower total roof structure thickness than placing it on top of the rafters. If the rafters are to be exposed, however, it will have to be placed above the rafters. The order of the various layers also depends on the type of roof covering, that is to say, the outermost layer to be used. If it is to be covered with roof tiles, a substructure of lengthwise and crosswise roof battens, sometimes referred to as battens and counterbattens, can be used. Tiles also need to be back ventilated, whereas metal roof sheeting requires a flat substructure and is waterproof, so does not need back ventilation. Now let us take a step-by-step look at how the layers are built up on a standard roof with pan tiles in which insulation is laid between the rafters. On the left you can see a cross-section through the roof structure, on the right a longitudinal section. Let us start with the rafters. Ideally, the roofers arrive on site the day after the load-bearing framework is erected and the topping out ceremony held. Their first job is to lay the sarking, a foil membrane that has two functions. Initially, it diverts rainwater off the roof until the roof tiles can be laid. Then it diverts any water that is driven through the tiny gaps between tiles by the wind. The membrane is tacked or stapled onto the rafters so that it sags a little between them. At the next stage, the roofers lay the counterbattens on top of and parallel to the rafters to ensure that the roof is ventilated from the bottom up. The battens, sometimes referred to as the main battens, are then laid at right angles to the counterbattens. Batten spacing depends on the type and size of the tiles to be used. Finally, the roof tiles are laid on the battens. Because the tiles have to overlap, they are always laid from eaves to ridge. In the example shown here, the lip at the back of each tile is hooked over the rear edge of the battens. The rest of the roofing work takes place inside the roof space. The insulation, generally soft mineral fiber insulation, is then fitted between the rafters. The rafters are deeper than the thickness of the insulation. This helps to ventilate the space between the insulation and the sarking membrane and to dissipate heat and water vapor. Next, a vapor barrier is laid over the insulation. This foil sheet retards water vapor diffusion from the inside and is necessary to prevent the buildup of condensation in the insulation material. It is very important for the vapor barrier to be laid across the entire surface of the roof with no breaks, and so the joints are taped together. This layer also makes the roof membrane windproof. The roof cladding is the final layer of the roof structure. It can consist of wooden boards or panels or plasterboard sheets that are fixed onto a substructure of wooden battens to allow for tolerances. Design and aesthetic aspects are important in this final layer. Here you can see the typical structure of a tiled roof with thermal insulation laid between the rafters. In another version, over-rafter insulation is laid on top of the rafters so that they can be left exposed in the space below. Although there is a wide range of possible structures for pitched roofs, they are all based on the superposition of a number of different layers. Summary. The various layers that go to make up a roof structure depend on a specific set of conditions. If a roof space is to be used as living space, the roof structure must include thermal insulation. Once the timber frame is in place, a sarking membrane is laid to divert rainwater until the tiles are laid. Counterbattens are then placed parallel to the rafters, followed by the main battens set at right angles, upon which the roof tiles are laid. Insulating material is then fixed between the rafters from the inside and covered with a vapour barrier and the roof facing, which is the finishing layer of the ceiling. Please take a look at the 6th film in our Pitched Roofs series, in which we show you what information to include in joist and rafter drawings.